They let us make it to a fourth episode. The haters are fuming. Welcome into the latest Spring Blake College Football Show. I am Spring Blake. This is a college football show. If this is your first time here, first of all, thank you so much for popping in. If you are listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you may get your podcast, make sure to like this show. Make sure to leave a 5-star review. Subscribe while you're there. If you are watching on YouTube, first appreciate the amazing, beautiful setup that we have in a spare bedroom. But also make sure to subscribe to that channel, like this video, comment on this video, share it with your friends. Any support that you guys can give to me on this show, I will give you tenfold in terms of content. So if you're new, thank you. If you are returning, thank you even more. Continuous support is what keeps us going, is what is going to take us from show 4 to show 400. So if you are coming back and you have not yet liked, subscribed, left a review, go ahead and do that right now. I appreciate that. If you're coming back, that means you would at least like something that I do. Or you just like to see me be a clown in front of a camera, in front of a microphone. So thank you guys for your support there on the channels. You can also go and head to my socials at Spring Blake CFB. That is both Twitter and TikTok for all of my content there. We put out some really nice clips. We have bigger conversations as well too that you won't get just on this show. And also, if you are an SEC fan or a Texas A&M fan, make sure to head over and follow all of my work at the Gig'em Gazette. I am writing, covering Texas A&M football for this upcoming season. Been a really fun first couple of weeks there, so if you want even more of Spring Blake, you can head over to there. So this is the first episode of 4 where we are going to be tiering out the Power 4 conferences heading into the new season. If you see 4 straight episodes, and I am in this hat, and I am in this shirt, first of all, remember the number 1 rule, sleeves stay off, hat stays on. That is because we are pre-taping all of these conference previews. I am heading to New York for both my birthday and my best friend's wedding. And so we are going to be gone from Monday to Monday, 4 episodes that we miss, but we've got 4 great things coming out. Today we are going to be doing our SEC preview / tiers. We are going to do Big 10, ACC, and Big 12. Then I'll be back, and we'll be right in time for Week 0. We'll do some playoff predictions, bets, all that stuff, as we are, I guess, basically at the 2025 season. So very exciting times here at the Spring Blake College Football Show. So a couple of things before we get into the SEC tiers. I am going to do something a little weird with my tiers. I am going to use my great group of friends to describe the different tiers within these conferences. Will it make things more confusing for you? Yes. Is it dumb? Yes. Will I get a kick out of it? Yeah. That's why I'm doing this. I do things that make me laugh, and so tiering out my friends and ranking them and then comparing football teams to them, I think that's pretty fun. So again, I will use the actual tiers when we're discussing these teams, but they'll also have names associated with them. So let's just go through those tiers really quick. The top tier in each conference is going to be our national title contenders, and that is going to be the Teddies of said conference. The Teddies of college football are our national title contenders. That Teddy is my best friend in the whole world. I love him to death. If you're a Teddy, you are capable of winning it all. And so that is the upper tier for all of these conferences. Now, not to be too far off, the tier below our conference, or our national title contenders, are going to be our Jacks. The Jacks are the conference title / playoff contender groups. Jack is my second closest friend in the world, so it's just fitting that he gets that second tier. Nothing can beat being a Teddy, but being a Jack in today's world is pretty damn solid. So again, Teddies, national title contenders, Jacks, conference title / playoff contenders, and then we move into our third tier. Our third tier is going to be the Adams. Now, Adam, of our friend group growing up, was always a little bit more on the quieter side, but grew up into an absolute dog. Adam is a great dude. He's an awesome friend. He does all his work in the shadows. He kind of sneaks up on you with a good one-liner, good joke. We were at a bachelor party. He brought the bush apples last month. Always just hits the right spots there. So Adam is going to be our sleeper / sneaky team tier. And those are those teams that, yeah, maybe they're not flirting with playoff contention throughout the course of the season, but maybe they're that team that, goes into Eugene and upsets Oregon and kind of wrecks their season, or can go in and knock an Indiana off and push them down a rung. So the Adams will be our sleeper/sneaky tiers. Then we move down into the May brothers. Now, the May brothers are going to be our bowl-bound teams. This is the one that is probably the biggest stretch. And the May brothers, they're a set of twins that we got, two beautiful boys there, Matt and Mike. Matt and Mike, two M's, bowl-bound, two B's. That's the closest I got. Matt also loves singing that Chance the Rapper line. We should be smoking the bowl. We should be smoking the bowl. So that's why I put them in the bowl tier. So that's the Mays. They're going to be our bowl-bound teams. And then last, we've got the Johnnies. Now, someone has to be last. And the Johnnies are going to be our teams that have some work to do. I love Johnny. He is just the youngest of our friend group. He's the one that is a year below us, and we would call him pledge on a trip we took once, so I just have him down here because someone had to be there. And I love Johnny. It's not that he's a bad friend, but I had to put him at the bottom. Okay, so those are our, 5 tiers? Within each conference, we are also going to have a Sage and an Anthony. And a Sage is going to be our biggest wild card in the conference because he is our biggest wild card as a friend. And that is the team that has the widest variety of outcomes. A team that I might have pretty low in the conference, but you could also paint a picture where 2 weeks before the regular season ends, they're still in the mix for a conference title. So the Sage will be awarded to the biggest wild card in each conference. And then we've got the Anthony, which is going to be my hottest pick of the predictions. Anthony is just the hottest of the friend group, gets all the ladies. So yeah, he'll be my kind of like sexy pick in each conference. We'll award as the Anthony, the team that I feel maybe a little bit is a little bit of a spicy pick for me. So those are our tiers. Again, the Teddies, national title contenders, the Jacks, conference title / playoff contenders. Adams will be our sleeper/sneaky upset teams. The May brothers will be our bowl-bound teams. Johnnies have some work to do. Sage is a wild card. Anthony is hot. Those are my friends. Those are our tiers. So let's move into the rest of this show.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
There are just 2 more notes before we get into the official tiers of the SEC. One, we are taping this in the second week of August. I think I'm banging all these out on August 10th. Super fun day for me here. Speaking into a microphone for probably about 4 hours. Things are going to change between now and the start of the season. I could tape this, on a Sunday, and Monday, Garrett Nussmeier could be ruled out for the season. Or, maybe we get reports a week in that Dante Moore is gonna come in and be the next unbelievable freshman quarterback, and that will elevate Oregon a little bit more. Things are going to change. So we're gonna do all these previews. I'm gonna tell you my thoughts as where these teams stand in the Power 4 conferences as of August 10th. But then as we head toward week 0, I'm going to allow myself just one mulligan in each conference. So one team or one positional slide that I can make, one adjustment, because as we know, college football, it throws you a curveball in these camps, and things could change between now and 10 days from now. So there will be a brief mulligan show, or we'll put it in one of our episodes before the season kicks off, where we're like, okay, let's just tinker with this just a little bit. But this is kind of, I've got all these written in a really thick pencil, and then we'll go over in pen before the season starts. And then the second thing, this is probably one of the most exciting things that I am looking forward to this upcoming college football season. I wanted to figure out how can I get my gambling content into this show in a fun manner. It's nice to just list off the picks I like, and we'll keep a tally of the record, but let's make it a little bit of a game. So because of that, I am going to battle it out with Chat GPT this season. GTP? GPT? GPT. Chat GPT. So here are the rules. We're going to be taking on Chat GPT to see if I'm a bigger ball knower than AI. I think I am. We'll find out. So here's what it's going to look like. For each conference preview, conference tier, myself and Chat GPT have picked 3 team totals to bet on. It could be overs, unders, whatever it might be. Then we are also going to do a show before the season kicks off where we pick conference title winners. We're going to do 3 futures to win the national championship and another future on the Heisman. And so before the season kicks off, we'll have all those bets. It'll be 3 in each conference, so 12 bets there. We're going to do conference titles that will bring it to 16. We're going to take 3 flyers on national champions and then a Heisman future as well too. So those will be our preseason bets. And then during the regular season, Chat GPT and I will be picking out our 6 best bets of the college football slates, tally those up as the season goes along, and see by the end of the year who knows ball more, me or AI. So I wanted to find a fun way to sprinkle in our betting content. I landed on battling it out with a computer. That being said, as we go through this show, when we get to those specific bets, I'll point out who had what. Maybe we'll just compile a list of them and make it its own separate video at one point, but we will mention it throughout this show. So the only last thing that I have, and I said I had 2, but I actually have 3. As a reminder, we did a power ratings show on last Wednesday, and that was rosters, coaches, who do I think are just the best teams in college football. These are going to be standing predictions. So it is going to be, we're taking into account things like scheduling and things like, bye luck or how they stack up with their opponents in this conference schedule. So you might see that I have certain teams rated higher but finishing lower in the standings. A lot of the time it comes down to maybe the trust of that team, the trust of its important players, maybe injury luck as well too, and then we'll also take into account the schedule. So those are just, one other thing. If you're like, oh, well, you had Alabama as the highest rated team in the SEC, but you have this other team ahead of them in the standings. That is because I think schedule plays a role, and obviously there's certain things that I trust in this sport more than others. So that is all the notes. Let's get into the fun stuff. We're going to spend more time talking about the teams at the top. And I guess this is thing number 4, delaying us even more from getting into the actual SEC tiers, but I told you at the beginning of this show in our first episode, we're going to focus on the stuff that to me matters, and every team matters, but not really, So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the Teddies and the Jacks and the Adams and maybe a little bit about the Mays, but we're not going to go in as much detail as those teams that I think are just bowl bound, the teams that need work. We all know that certain teams need work. We all know that certain teams have, really bad rosters or a bad coaching staff or a really tough schedule. So we're going to focus on what is important in this sport, and I feel bad saying that because there's a lot of teams that will not get as much coverage. I also think you guys don't want to spend and hear my 7-minute breakdown on Mississippi State football. So we'll focus on the stuff at the top, what really matters in this conference. We'll mention where we think things fall for those other teams, but a lot of the work will be done at this the top end of things.
My name's Blake.
All right, so let's rip the lid off. I've got the Georgia Bulldogs finishing the regular season as my number 1 team in the SEC. We spent some time last week talking about everything going right for this team. I think the biggest addition is having a revamped and deep receiving room. I like that they have some continuity at the running back position. And I think Gunnar Stockton, as a more athletic quarterback, will add a Riley Leonard-esque running ability to this game and to this offense. I also think he'll probably be a little bit more even keel than Carson Beck was last year. He might not have the same highs that Beck had, but he also won't have those same lows. So I like what they've got in at quarterback to kind of facilitate the ball out to all these new weapons. I always have faith in Kirby Smart and this, university's development along the offensive line. Yes, there are some new pieces, but I don't enter a year being overly concerned about what Georgia is going to do in the trenches. And I think that they've got top 10 units at every level of the defense. We said last week as well, too, the breakout player for this team is going to be Elo Medozi, the edge transfer from Army. He's getting so much buzz this offseason. I think he's set to have one of the best seasons statistically of anyone at this position. So I do have other rosters in this conference rated higher than the Bulldogs, but again, this is a record and standings conversation and prediction. All things considered, it's a pretty light SEC schedule. Just 3 true road games. They do have 2 neutral site ones, but 3 true road games at Tennessee, Auburn, and Mississippi State. We'll talk about those teams later, but I feel good about Georgia handling those 3 teams on the road. They do have to play Bama, Texas, and Ole Miss, but get all 3 of them at home, where they have yet to lose over the last 5 seasons. So this might not be the same depth or totality of high-end talent that we have come to expect the last 5 to 7 years at Georgia, but this is still a roster very much capable of taking advantage of a lighter SEC schedule, finishing atop the conference with what I believe to be about a 10-win season, and playing for an SEC title come year's end. So that's why I'm high on the Bulldogs. I am not the only one. This is our first Chat GPT bet of the regular season. They are taking the Bulldogs over 9.5 wins at minus 170 odds. So a lot of juice on that. But as I just said, I think Chat GPT got this one right. So that's Georgia, my number one team in the Teddy's tier, the national title contenders tier of the SEC. They are not alone. My next Teddy of the SEC, my next national title contender in this great Southeastern Conference is the Alabama Crimson Tide. I've got them finishing second in the conference, playing for a conference title against Georgia. I spent plenty of time gushing over this roster on last Wednesday's show. The quick recap is that I think it's the best defense in the nation and also a top 10 group at running back, offensive line, and wide receiver. Ryan Grubb is a welcomed addition to the offensive coaching staff, and Ty Simpson just needs to do a serviceable job in Tuscaloosa and allow the pieces around him to do the rest of the work. The breakout star for me on this team is at tailback. I think Bama can really get back to some smash mouth football behind this great offensive line with Jam Miller. He's been there a while, but Jalen Milroe kind of took a lot of the running offense away from a feature back. I think this will be the feature back. I think they'll really, just go head on into the run game. He'll have a really great season there for the Crimson Tide. They do have a tough schedule, but it's in the bottom half in terms of difficulty within its own conference. They have road games at Georgia, at Mizzou, at South Carolina, and Auburn, but I think they have a strong talent edge in those latter three. They also get LSU, Oklahoma, and Tennessee all at home. So, that's a rough schedule. I just named some of the top teams in this conference. They do avoid Texas, I believe. Yep, so no Texas on there. No Texas A&M, but still some really tough games. Look, Kalen Deboer had the Huskies playing for a national title in his second season there. And I think he's got a great opportunity to repeat that story here with the Crimson Tide and at the very least have them in the conference title game at the very end of this season. So Alabama, my number 2 team in the SEC, second team in that national title contending tier. And then my third and final team in the national title contender tier of the SEC, the Teddies of the SEC, but the one that will miss out on the conference title championship game, it's Steve Sarkisian's Texas Longhorns. So, again, for the sake of making sure you're all on the same page with me, let's go back in time. On Wednesday, I had Texas rated as the third best team in the nation, higher than Georgia, just one slot behind Alabama, but because of the difference in schedules, I have them finishing third in the conference and not making it to an SEC championship. So the schedule opens with Ohio State, as we all know, maybe the most electric game, week 1 game we've ever had, and also includes road trips to tough environments of Florida and Georgia. They also have Oklahoma on the neutral site game, finish the season with Texas A&M. It may very well come down to that game at Georgia that decides if they get into a conference title appearance or not. But for now, I'm going to ride with the Bulldogs to extend that 5-year home game winning streak, take care of the Longhorns in between the hedges, and keep Texas out of the SEC title game. The breakout star on this team is obvious. It's Arch. Can't wait to see what he does in his first full season running the show here. I really think he'll step in as one of the best 5 throwers of the football in the sport. I think he's one of those guys that will make players around him better. I also think that his mobility will be a huge upgrade to this offense. The offensive line did not play well last season, and it should be one of those areas that you're concerned about heading into the new year, but with a more athletic quarterback, I don't think it will look as drastic as it did last year, with Ewers being not only just a little banged up at times, but more of a statue in the pocket. As I've said a few times now, it's one of the best rosters and coaching staffs in the world, and if Arch Manning is who we think he is, they'll easily hang around in the conference title conversation and the national title contender all season as well. So Texas Longhorns, my number 3 team in the SEC, and finishing off the group of this conference that I consider to be national title contenders.
Blake. What?
So we are switching tiers to the Jacks now, which again are the conference title / playoff contenders. And not only are we starting with the Jack, we're throwing in a little Rico on the side. My sexiest pick of the SEC, the first team in this conference title / playoff contender list, it is the Texas A&M Aggies. I guess I should have said this. For a lot of these teams that we have talked about in detail already, I'm just going to quickly recap what we've said. Please head to those other shows if you've yet to hear me talk in depth about A&M or Texas or Georgia or Bama. But just to hit the quick hits, elite offensive line, great running back room, hard-hitting defense, really great coaching staff. Concern is going to be the passing game. Marcel Reed at quarterback, Casey Concepcion from NC State, Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator, all kind of need each other in a really big way this season after what were underwhelming years for all three of them in 2024. They also need to pick up the sloppy play on defense. Penalties, busted coverages last year really hurt them down the stretch. I do think you're going to hear me say it a ton in these shows, but the second year bump, especially defensively, always helps out teams. So I think the second year of this Mike Elko defense will have this unit playing at a higher level. That being said, my breakout player for this team, and the reason why I have them up to 4, is Marcel Reed. We already know he's electric on the ground. You always have to account for his legs. And I think all you have to do is take a small step forward as a 3-level thrower, and he'll turn into one of the harder players in the country to defend. He doesn't need to be, I'm trying to think, like a prolific thrower like Bo Nix was at Oregon. He just needs to take a small step, and because he's got that athletic ability and always a threat to make dudes miss and break off a 40-yard run, that will make him just a nightmare to defend. So moving into the schedule, it's the 14th hardest in the nation, but only the 8th hardest in the SEC, so kind of in that middle of the pack within its own conference. They do have a tough game at Notre Dame in week 3. I do like the fact that it's early in the season because I think Notre Dame is going to have to figure a lot of things out. They don't get any good bye luck. They have 5 straight games to kick off SEC play with games against Auburn, Florida, and at LSU. Then a bye week followed by Mizzou, home for South Carolina, and Texas to close out the year. Those are really tough games to go along with Notre Dame in the non-con. This, to me, almost like last year, but probably another step higher, has a 9-2 type feeling heading into the regular season finale against Texas. And just as I said with Texas losing to Georgia and that probably being the difference of them making the conference title game or not, I think the Longhorns win that one against A&M and keep the Aggies just outside of the conference title picture, I would say. So that is my reasoning behind Texas A&M. This is also going to be the first Spring Blake bet of the year. SEC team total, we are taking Texas A&M over 7.5 wins. It is juiced just like those Georgia odds were for Chat GPT. It's minus 168, so you got to lay a little bit on it. It would be really hard for me to see this team not getting to 8 games, if not 9. I think this is a 9-win team, so I think you're getting really good value here at 7.5. So Texas A&M kicks off the Jacks, the playoff contenders of the SEC. The team I've got as my second member of the conference title / playoff contender tier in the SEC and finishing 5th in the conference by season's end, it's the Oklahoma Sooners. I anticipate this being one of the most improved teams in the nation. Huge upgrades at offensive play caller, quarterback, running back to go along with already was a top 10 defense last season, and what I project to be the best front 7 in the entire sport. Now the concern is the offensive line. It can't get much worse. So kind of like I said with Marcel Reed just taking that next step, if Oklahoma can just take a marginal step along the offensive line, that's going to open things up for this entire offense. Breakout player is Deion Burks at wideout. I think he has the chance to be a star receiver in this league if he can stay healthy for the entire season. I think this offense is going to facilitate through him specifically in the passing game. I think they're going to put up a lot of points, and it'll be because of Deion Burks really making things happen in the passing game. So here's the funny thing that with Oklahoma's schedule, they have the 7th hardest in the nation, but it's only the 5th hardest in the conference. That just speaks to the difficulty of life in the SEC. They host Michigan early in the year in a tough non-conference game. When we talk playoffs in about 10 days or so, that game there, Michigan and Oklahoma, That is going to be so massive for an at-large bid. I think both of these teams will very much be in the conversation for one of those final playoff teams, and how they fare in week 2 might make the difference. So that's a huge game on the Oklahoma schedule. They also host Auburn, Ole Miss, Mizzou, and LSU. Have Texas on the neutral site in the middle of the year, and have some really tough road trips to South Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves over here, but that is 6 games against my top 10 teams in the conference. That's a really tough schedule, but I'm projecting Oklahoma to click in such a way that they manage to get through all of that and finish as the 5th best team in this conference, and should have a really strong resume to elevate their conversation for one of those at-large bids in the college football playoffs. So Oklahoma, my number 5 team, are finishing 5th in the SEC conference.
You want to go to war, Balaki?
So my third team that I've got in the playoff contender / SEC title contender tier, it's the Florida Gators. If you're starting to get an idea of what I'm betting on when it comes to successful teams in this conference, it should be no surprise to you that I've got the Gators finishing here, and a team that will be in the mix for both a conference title and playoff appearance. Experienced, talented groups in the trenches. The Gators have one of the best offensive lines in the nation, which will lead way for a terrific ground game led by Jordan Baugh, but not to forget that DJ Lagway will also add a lot on the ground as well too. So I love the physicality and the mentality they'll have offensively. It starts up front with a great offensive line. They also have another top 10 unit along the defensive line that will wreak havoc against both the run and the pass. They're not just one-faceted. They'll beat you both ways. I love this team from the inside out. So health at quarterback is obviously paramount here. The team could weasel its way into an SEC title game if Lagway plays the entire year and is as great as we all expect him to be. But they could also finish 500 in conference play if he misses stretches of games or has to be subbed out for a drive or two. He is that important to the success of this roster and team. So that is, to me, the biggest worry about the Gators heading into the new year. Now, the reason that I have them all the way down at 6th and not, just on the cusp of the, national title contending tier, and why I have teams like A&M and Oklahoma ahead of them, the schedule is absurd. It's ridiculous. So you have Miami and Florida State in the non-conference game, and then this in SEC play. At LSU, home versus Texas, at Texas A&M, Georgia on a neutral site, Ole Miss at home, and Tennessee. That right there is 5 of my top 16 teams in the nation, and another 2 that were just on the outside. I think the Gators will win some of those. I think they'll lose some of those, which is why I've got them down a couple notches as my number 6 team in the SEC, but they are still in that tier of, fringe conference title contender and, will be in line for one of those at-large bids by the end of the season.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
All right, so now at number 7 in the SEC, this is one that probably is my spiciest. It's not my hottest. I didn't give it the Rico because it's not my hottest. I'm actually a little bit down on this team. It might sound bad to have the LSU Tigers at number 7, but we'll get into why. They are my biggest wild card in the SEC. I have given LSU my Sage of the conference, so this is the Sage recipient again. We'll go into why they could win it all, or why they could be bumped down here at 7 in conference play. This would be underwhelming, considering what expectations we all have for LSU. So let me explain why. I absolutely love some pieces on this roster. Quarterback, receivers, linebacker. But their 2 biggest concerns for me are along the offensive and defensive lines, and that's not winning football in the SEC. As I've said, I'm sitting here saying this in August, both units could see significant jumps, and maybe these portal additions they made, maybe the new guys rising up to the occasion all hit, but the schedule doesn't really give you that many opportunities to brush off those question marks. When you have to face the defensive lines of Clemson, Florida, Bama, and Oklahoma, and you're shaky up front, that's a major concern. When you have to face the offensive lines of Clemson, Florida, A&M, and Bama, and you're shaky up front, that is a major concern. So that's why this team is my wild card. Everything could hit, and they're playing for an SEC title game. Or everything could miss, and they're a 4-loss team in the conference. My best guess is that they finish somewhere at that 3-loss range in conference play. If they lose that Clemson game, that definitely keeps them out of the at-large conversation, which puts them in the middle of the pack of the SEC tiers and an underwhelming campaign for Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers.
My name's Blake.
All right, and last but not least, I've got one final team in this SEC title/playoff contender tier, and I think it's one that might catch people by surprise, but I think Tennessee is still very much capable of building off their 2024 season and making its way into another college football playoff appearance, or at very least the conversation late in the year. I'll always have my faith in Josh Heupel as a head coach. As long as he's running the show in Knoxville, they'll always have one of the premier offenses in the nation. You know, obviously Nico Iamaleava is out, Joey Aguilar is in, and while it can take a new quarterback some time to get his feet wet, this offense is set up to make life very easy for the quarterback, to just be a facilitator, follow the clearly made instructions. I'm actually curious to see if Joey performs a little bit better than Nico, and Nico, we all acknowledge, did not light it up last year. I'm interested to see if Joey performs better just simply because Nico was a little bit of a freelancer at times and would make life more difficult for himself. You know, if Joey operates just more within the structure, the offense as a whole might be better because of it. You know, despite losing a lot of talent on offense, I still think they're going to be on par with where they were a season ago. You know, the offensive line is very different. You lose the talented running game as well, too, behind Dylan Sampson. I still, like I said, with Heupel and some of these other offensive coaches, we just expect them to churn out great runners and develop offensive linemen. So if it's not awesome early in the year, it might be by season's end. I don't think the offense as of a whole is going to be that much worse than it was in 2024. So the biggest reason that I kept them in this tier is their defense. They returned 8 starters from last year, have a great defensive line yet again, and maybe even a better secondary than they did in 2024. I think Tim Banks has done a really nice job there as the defensive coordinator, and I think if the offense isn't as streaky as it was last year, they probably won't have to save the day as much as they did in 2024. You know, sometimes that offense put the defense in a really bad position, and if it can just be more neutral on offense, I think the defense will get more opportunities to really show that they're one of the top units in the nation. And then the last thing for having them in this tier, like I said, we're at team 8 now, and I've got an 8th team that I say could compete for a conference title or could make an at-large bid in the playoffs. They have the second easiest schedule in the SEC to go along with everything I love on the roster. They avoid Texas, they avoid LSU, A&M, and Ole Miss. They also get Oklahoma and Georgia at home. So those are all the reasons I'm still buying in on the Tennessee Volunteers. Do I think that they grow on what they did last year? Maybe not. But if they're still in that 10-2, 9-3 range with the schedule they have, and the offense looks a little bit more capable than it did at times last year, this is very much a team that will still be in the conversation for the college football playoffs.
Blake. What?
All right, so that ties a bow on the conference title, playoff contending teams I see in the SEC. We're moving down a rung now to some of those sleepier, sneakier teams. Maybe I don't see them being in the playoff conversation for the entire season, but they're still one of those teams that could pull off an upset or two, especially this first one that I've got here. So let's just rip right in to the sleeper, sneaky teams of the SEC. My 9th team in the conference, it's Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss Rebels. This is a really talented and deep conference. I do have them taking a clear step back, obviously going from being on the cusp of playoff contention last year, now down into the sleeper teams. It's definitely not what you would want to expect year over year, so let's go into why. You know, just like with Heupel, I have faith in Lane's work on offense. He's one of the few guys that you never bat an eye at. But last year's offensive line had 222 career starts across it, and that number dips to 78 this year. You also go from a 3-year starter in Jackson Dart to Austin Simmons, a guy I think is actually going to be really good, but there may be a little bit of a learning curve as he gets his feet wet. You know, we saw him for one drive, I believe, against Georgia, marched right down the field, was pretty cool. If that's a sight, if that's one of those things that, is who he is going to be for the full year, he'll definitely pull off a few of these upsets and probably even get this team into, an interesting playoff conversation. But the biggest reason that I don't have them in that tier and I have them down as just a sleepy, sneaky team is because of their defense. Replacing all but one starter from last season, a group that was one of the best defenses in the entire nation. I don't think they get enough credit for that. The offense we always come to know with Lane and expect high things. The defense was a top 2 to 3 unit in the entire country. They lost a lot. Now they replace a lot because Lane is the portal king, and like I say with all these teams, it's August. I don't know necessarily what they got and how it's all going to work, but it might be too much to overcome all at once. The last thing that might come down to Ole Miss and where they finish in this season is how they handled their games at home. They've got LSU, South Carolina, and Florida on the schedule, and they do have a couple tough road trips to Georgia and Oklahoma as well. I think it's a pretty manageable schedule within the SEC, but the losses I previously mentioned will keep them from maintaining double-digit win success that they had the last 2 years. So I think best case scenario, 9-3, to me, most likely might be that 8-4 range just because the defense lost so much. Still one of those teams that is going to really, shock a few teams in this nation, pull off a couple upsets. But the Ole Miss Rebels still my 9th team in the conference heading into 2025. However, while I might be a little bit lower on the Ole Miss Rebels, Chat GPT is not. This is going to be AI's second bet of the SEC. They're going to take Ole Miss to have over 8.5 wins at -115 odds. I don't think that's honestly a terrible bet. When they turned that out, I was like, yeah, 9 wins actually should make sense. It's not heavy juice as well, too. That is Chat GPT's second bet of the SEC to go along with Georgia getting over 9.5 wins. So we're moving down to my number 10 team in the conference, and another team that I'm just not ready to put in the tier of playoff contender or conference title contender is the Auburn Tigers, even though I think Hugh Freeze has done a really nice job building up this team. It's a very talented and experienced offensive line. I like the wide receiver room. I think it's a top 5 group in the nation. And think about for a second how important that is for new quarterback Jackson Arnold. This dude was touted as like the next great Oklahoma quarterback. But he was massively let down by a disaster of a situation at Oklahoma. It was one of the worst Power 4 offensive lines. I think they lost like their top 6 receivers to injury. Really bad offensive coordinator that I think they fired midway through the season. He was benched for a little bit, put back in. Nightmare of a scenario for him. Now he comes to Auburn, and it's one of the best wide receiver rooms, and it's a really experienced offensive line. And I do like Hugh Freeze as an offensive mind in this sport. If Arnold is who we think he is and can be what we all thought he was going to be, this offense could take a massive leap this upcoming season. So that is why I'm pretty high on the Auburn Tigers. All things considered, kind of like with, who was I just talking about? Kind of like with, who was it? Who were we just talking about 2 teams ago? Gosh, my brain is fried. 4 episodes are going to kill me. Kind of like Tennessee. That is who I meant. So kind of like with Tennessee last year, I thought, Auburn's offense was so volatile that it put the defense in really bad positions where they kind of had to come and save the day and probably looked a little bit worse than they actually are. They returned 6 starters from that group. They have a really strong secondary. Jay Crawford leads the way, ascending young talent at corner. Again, I think they were put in bad positions because of how shaky the offense was. So if we're just assuming that Arnold is who we want him to be and that everything around him will elevate that offense, I think the numbers defensively will see a little bit of a facelift because of that. So man, you just painted out a great team, Blake. Why do you have them 10th in the SEC? The schedule is not great at all, having to face 4 of my top 5 teams in the conference, Oklahoma, A&M, Georgia, and Alabama. And man, oh man, is this a really important week 1 game against the Baylor Bears. Baylor is kind of like a frisky, fun pick to win the Big 12. You can't go in and lose that one because the early parts of the schedule in the SEC, you could be staring at a 2-3, 1-4 scenario if things don't go totally right. Like I said, they have some of those tougher teams in the conference. Winning that week 1 against Baylor and looking good is going to be a huge momentum setter for the season. Losing it is equally as bad. And so, it's not that I think Auburn is a bad team this season. I think they're actually much improved and could take that jump. It's just the depth of this conference that has them all the way down at 10th. Still a sneaky team, one more than capable of pulling off an upset or 2 throughout the season, ruining someone's year, and maybe flirting with that just missed out on the playoff conversation.
You want to go to war, Balaki?
Missouri feels like one of those teams that is always in this sleeper, sneaky team category, lurking in the shadows, and they've certainly delivered under head coach Eli Drinkwitz. But coming off of back-to-back 10-win seasons, I think there's going to be a slight step back this year where they'll finish with the 11th best standings in the Southeastern Conference, all while still being, like I said, one of those sneakier teams pulling off a patented upset. The reason they'll be lurking is because of the defense. One of the better ones in the entire nation, returns 9 starters from a season ago. It's a really strong, experienced group. Really, there isn't a glaring weakness at any of the 3 levels. You know, Brady Cook and Luther Burden were the household names on offense the last couple of years. That'll now turn into Bo Pribula, Drew Aller's backup, from Penn State, and Kevin Coleman, who transfers in after almost a 1,000-yard season at Mississippi State. So those will be the new guys, the focal point on offense. I think the offensive line and running game is strong as well, too. It feels weird thinking highly of this team, but having them down so low. But the reason being, I think there are a lot of teams that have surpassed what Missouri has this year. I think Oklahoma is not going to be the slouch that they were. I think Florida rode some really nice momentum from last season and will have jumped Missouri in terms of talent, and Auburn as well too. Those are 3 teams that typically I'd have Missouri above if I was doing a standings predictions show. But because of their ascension, someone has to fall back. And when I look at just who might be lacking the most top-tier talent, who might not have the best luck over the course of the season, I've got Missouri taking that step back. That being said, they have plenty of chances to pull off that patented upset because they've got Alabama, Auburn, A&M, and Oklahoma all on the schedule. The Missouri Tigers, my 11th team in the Southeastern Conference, and ding, 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 we have a double bet here from Chat GPT and Spring Blake. Both are taking Missouri to win over 6.5 games this season, as at minus 164 odds. I think this is definitely a 7-win team. Just because I have them at 11th doesn't mean I hate them. I think they're definitely a winning football program above 500. They'll get to that. And I'm not the only one that thinks so because Chat GPT does. Chat GPT, why can't I say that? It's a really tough way to start off a gambling contest if you can't pronounce your opponent's name. All right, so we're still rolling on through. As I said, we'll shorten up the conversations when we get to those bowl-bound, needs improvement type teams, but I've still got 2 more teams in this sleeper category. So let's move on to our number 12 team in the Southeastern Conference. I told you on Friday's show that I expected some major regressions from South Carolina, and I've got them all the way down to 12th in the conference coming off a 9-3 year in 2024. A lot of empty calories on the roster. I love Dylan Stewart. I love Lanorris Sellers. Nick Harbor is just an absolute freak athlete, despite not maybe producing a ton on a football field. But outside of that, major questions. Lost about everybody on defense that mattered, outside of Stewart, as I said. But what's really interesting about Dylan Stewart is because of the talent that was on that defensive line and in the linebacker room, he was kind of just allowed to be an ancillary guy that just kind of worked off the edge and didn't have to be the focal point of an offense's game plan. Now he's that lone dude there. So I'm interested to see if, with all the attention on him, if he's not able to produce at as high of a level as he did last season. Still a really great player, though. Don't take that as me kind of bashing him. All that said, Lanorris Sellers playing quarterback for this team will always keep them in the sleeper/sneaky category tier. He's a one-man wrecking crew, one of the few players in the sport that can single-handedly change outcomes of games, and I could definitely see this team pulling off an upset or 2 throughout the regular season. But in terms of just total success on the year, small step back, kind of a big one if you look at the standings. I've got them down as my 12th team in the Southeastern Conference. And oh wait, we've got one more sleeper team here at 13th in the conference, and that's crazy. For every other conference that we are going to do, we do not go 13 deep in those top 3 tiers. I know the Big Ten's won the last 2 national titles. This is the conference because we're still at Team 13, and it's a sleeper team that will pull off an upset or 2 this year. It's the Arkansas Razorbacks. They're frisky. They're going to be the team that I think has the biggest oh shit upset of the season just because people don't have as high of expectations. I think it's a super fun offense behind offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino. Taylon Green is truly dynamic with the football. I think they reloaded nicely at tailback and wideout this offseason, and the offensive line is just going to be better by taking another step forward this year altogether. They went pretty heavy on transfers defensively and also still returned 6 starters from last year. What it boils down to for me, and why I had Arkansas in this sleeper category tier, is I think any given week the offense could just go nuclear. And it might not be one of those where they're just great all season, but maybe they just have this really high and low roller coaster of a year on offense. And when it does hit, some of those retooling defenses like Ole Miss or maybe LSU fixing things up front, there's a couple games on the schedule that'll get real tense because Arkansas is just moving up and down the field. So they're not the most talented team. They might not get, more than 7 wins on the season, but they're very much in that sleeper category team because I think this offense is more than capable of ruining somebody's season. So that is something to definitely keep an eye on out this year. And so those are the sleepers, sneaky teams, the atoms of the SEC. We've got 3 teams left in this conference. I've got 1 bowl-bound team in the SEC. That is, again, our May Brothers category, and it's the Vanderbilt Commodores. Last year was super fun. There is an attitude, charisma at Vandy right now that just hasn't been around in quite some time. I love certain parts of the roster. Overall, it's one of the more experienced teams in college football. I think last year they were just maybe a little bit more opportunistic than talented, which is why we might see some regressions this year, and they just are kind of okay and a bowl-bound team. They can definitely get another 6 or 7 wins on the schedule. I just don't take them seriously as like, okay, they're going to move up into that sleeper/sneaky team category. I think we know what they are. The expectations are there. Everybody in the Southeastern Conference needs to game plan and prepare for them. And because of that, I think they'll kind of stay put with where they were last year. And then we get to the Johnnies, the teams with work to do. 15th in the conference, I've got the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Rough season for Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State, going 2-10. Some really embarrassing outcomes, blowout loss to Toledo and Arkansas. I think they're better this season. Again, I don't have them finishing last in the conference. They revamped the defensive line. I think there's like 60 new transfers in. Blake Shapen, hopefully healthy for a full season at quarterback. The offensive line might be a little bit better. Nice running back room. I'm painting reasons for why they won't be atrocious. But it's just not to the point of jumping to bowl eligibility just yet, and a team I'm taking to finish second to last in the Southeastern Conference. And that brings me to my final team in the SEC. It is Mark Stoops and his Kentucky Wildcats. Last year's 4-8 season included some awesome highlights. They beat Ole Miss on the road, lost to Georgia by just a point, but the rest was pretty underwhelming. I think the competency of the conference is a little bit better, and because of that, I just think things are stale at Kentucky right now. They should be better at quarterback, running back, which might help things out overall, but there's just 5 starters on defense that are coming back, and the schedule is just ridiculous. Ole Miss, South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Auburn, Florida, and a really good Louisville team to close out their season. Not ideal with the roster they have in place. I think this is a chance for Mark Stoops to be one of the first coaches fired into the season. They really have their work cut out for them in 2025. The Kentucky Wildcats, not only my last place team in the conference, but the final spring break bet of this show. So far, I have given you Texas A&M over 7.5 wins. I've given you Missouri over 6.5 wins. I am taking under 4.5 wins at Kentucky this season. I think best case scenario, they are a 4-win team. So because of that, taking the under there, the odds are nice, minus 114. And that is going to wrap up our SEC tier preview prediction show. We'll get into conference title winners and all that stuff at a later date. We're going to do all of the conferences together at that time. But again, just to run through the rankings real quick, I guess, I don't know if we even need to. I've got Georgia with the best record in the conference, Alabama right behind them, Texas at number 3. Those are the 3 national title contenders within this conference. Playoff contenders, conference title contenders, I got A&M finishing 4th, Oklahoma 5th, Florida 6th, LSU 7th, Tennessee 8th. those are all of our playoff title contenders. Then we move into the sneaky teams, sleeper/sneaky teams. Ole Miss at 9, Auburn at 10, 11 Missouri, 12 South Carolina, 13 Arkansas, and then we get into my one bowl-bound team, Vanderbilt, and the work to do at Mississippi State and Kentucky. I apologize if this episode was a little bit sloppy. Trying to get 4 of these out all at once. I got my work cut out for me today. It's a lot of work. Didn't sleep too much. Still planning and getting prepared to not only leave work for a week, but leave the house for a week. So we got a lot going on. Thank you for sticking along with this, even though I may not have been at my best. Maybe we'll get some extra caffeine before I film these next 3, and we'll do better throughout the rest of the day. Thank you so much for coming back and supporting this show. If you're here for the first time, thank you for joining us. We'll be back on a Wednesday with what I believe is a Big Ten tier ranking prediction, and we'll do ACC Friday, Big 12 Monday, playoffs, big picture stuff Wednesday, and then it's week 0, baby. I am so excited. I love doing this. Thank you for your time. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you in a couple of days. Peace.